Hello everyone, I'm Charlie Tolhurst and welcome to your Formula 1 French Grand Prix preview today. Today is, of course, the video that I'm going to be talking about the French Grand Prix, the 2021 Formula 1 French Grand Prix weekend warm-up, should I say, with me today, Charlie. Now, as you'd have seen, FP1 has already just been finished, and also FP2 will also have concluded today as well. Max Verstappen quickest in FP2 and Valtteri Bottas fastest in first practice. But the whole point of this video is to give you a rundown of what the French Grand Prix is on the Formula 1 calendar, and also talking about the 2021 event as well. So the French Grand Prix was first used in Formula 1 in 1970. Of course, that was at Paul Ricard in France. And that was at the first time at Paul Ricard that the French Grand Prix actually was held. But the French Grand Prix has actually been held at a number of other many motor racing circuits over the years. Just take a look at some of the most famous tracks that the French Grand Prix has actually been to as well. You've got Reims, a very famous venue as well. Reims, Charade, Magny, Paul Ricard, Dijon. It was a very popular event in terms of that. The French Grand Prix was on the calendar as well. It used to race at Paul Ricard as well. You might remember in 1986 they did have to use the shorter circuit after the fatal crash of Elino De Angelis during testing for that year's event. The track actually had to be modified and they used a shorter track. You might remember 1989, Maurizio Guzmin causing a small multi-car pile-up down at the first corner at that year's event. Critically, that year's race was won by Alain Prost. After early 1990, the French Grand Prix also moved to Magny-Cours in France between, I think, 1991 and 2007 as well. And, of course, the French Grand Prix then returned to the calendar in 2016 at Paul Ricard under a new configurated Paul Ricard circuit. Now, the 2021 edition is a big one. Obviously, the last time Formula 1 race there was in 2019 with Lewis Hamilton claiming the win for Mercedes. And, of course, Valtteri Bottas and Max Verstappen, I believe, were the next two drivers finishing in those positions. But yes, obviously last year the French Grand Prix was postponed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This time round, Formula 1 will be holding an event. I believe fans will also be in attendance for the race action at Paul Ricard this weekend as well. And this is a weekend that we're going to see plenty of controversy, because this weekend as well there's going to be several tests for the Flexi Wings. You know, the controversial Flexi Wings that, of course, Red Bull team boss Christian Horner and Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff have also been discussing about. It's been quite hot in the media at the moment in Formula 1 over the Flexi Wing scandal. What kind of investigations are going to be launched after the tests? The FIA are testing them, and obviously they'll have to check the rule book to see whether these Flexi Wings do pass the regulatory tests that are going to be met. So it's going to be interesting. Certainly we'll hear, I reckon, a lot bit more from Toto Wolff and Christian Horner this weekend on this. And it's a big weekend as well for many teams. It's a big weekend for Mercedes, who have had who come off the back of two difficult races. Of course, if you might remember in Monaco, Lewis Hamilton only finished 7th. Valtteri Bottas retiring after, I believe, a wheel gun failure in the pits. And then at Baku last time out, neither car finished in the points. So Mercedes will certainly want to look for redemption this weekend in France. A team that is going into this weekend very strongly is Red Bull, who have come off the back of two successive race wins, with Max Verstappen taking the honours in Monaco, and Sergio Perez winning his second career victory in Formula 1, taking his second career victory, will win at the chaotic Azerbaijan Grand Prix, in which Max Verstappen, who was leading majority of the race, unfortunately suffered a spectacular tyre failure. So with that in mind, of course, the championship standings still remain the same. Max Verstappen 4 points clear of Lewis Hamilton going into the French Grand Prix at the Castallet in France. And I'm just going to show you the lap of Paul Ricard in France under this new configuration of the circuit. This has been used in 2018 present. The lap will start with a run down into turn 1, which is a quick left-right flick, a chicane that is taken at high speed in Formula 1. You then go down a back straight in towards the very tricky section at turns 3, 4 and 5, in which this section is very fast. You come off a high speed right into a very tight left and then a tight right again. So this is going to be very difficult on the rear tyres. We could see some drivers potentially making mistakes there during particularly qualifying if they get it wrong, because the back end is very lively, can step out through there. We then have a long right at turn 6 before a flat out turn 7 takes you onto one of 2 DRS zones on the circuit. The first activation zone will be down the exit of turn 7, down the Van der Mistral straight into the turns 8, 9 chicane, before running out of turn 9. Of course, that is in DRS zone, but obviously after turns 8 and 9, you then run out through the very famous Sing corner, one of the most iconic corners in F1, flat out in these modern F1 cars. Of course, that was the site where Lance Stroll went off a couple of years ago as well, after suffering a puncture there. Then you got Le Beausset at turn 11, turn 12, 13 and 13 of quick flicks, and then a difficult ending to the lap with quite a quick entrance into a blind turn 14 before then having to really correct the front end for the right-hander of turn 15. By the way, this is a very tough section. This reminds you a lot of Coram and Murray's at Snetterton, where you're coming through such a quick corner and then you're having to get prepared. So it's, again, the rear tyres will certainly be tested, and then you go back onto the start-finish straight, and that will be where the second DRS activation zone is. So it's difficult. Lap record is currently set by Sebastian Vettel with a time of 1:32.720. That was the fastest lap time recorded at Paul Ricard, and that, just to confirm, that was back a couple of years ago, I believe, 2019, the last time they raced there, and that fastest lap was set by Sebastian Vettel, who was racing for Ferrari at the time, now with Aston Martin, and he's going to be coming off the back of a very strong weekend in Azerbaijan as well, with Sebastian Vettel, who finished a fantastic second. Great to see his team finally getting a very well-deserved podium of 11th on the grid as well. Safety car, you benefit from safety cars, from drivers making mistakes, overtaking as well. Masterclass from Seb. Pierre Gasly finishing 3rd for AlphaTauri, another strong result from him. So yes, there's plenty of great excitement coming up for this weekend's French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard. I cannot wait for this event. Obviously, McLaren this weekend, as you would have seen during practice today, were running special liveries in memory of Monsieur Ogier, who used to be a former member of McLaren, who we miss very much in the Formula 1 paddock. Sadly, Monsieur Ogier, if you don't remember him, very famous name at McLaren. If you know McLaren, very famous man. He sadly passed away earlier this month. And of course, McLaren will be running special tributes to Monsieur Ogier this weekend at Paul Ricard in France. So it's a lovely tribute as well. And yes, Formula 1 will be racing at Paul Ricard, along with, I believe, Formula 3 are also racing at Paul Ricard this weekend as well. You can watch the action. I think Lorenz in Delhi to pole there as well. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Formula 1 gets on this weekend. Because this is actually a very important part of the season. This is the first of the triple headers. It's a triple header. In other words, we're racing for the next 3 weeks. After Formula 1 head to the French Grand Prix, we then have a week later the Styrian Grand Prix, of course, and also the Austrian Grand Prix. It's going to be back-to-back races once again at Austria. So please, guys, stay tuned for that. The dates that these races will run on will be the 26th and the 27th and the 4th of the 27th of June and the 4th of July. That's when the next race is, and followed by that, the 2-week break until the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. So I'll keep you guys posted on all the news. But that's all the news from Formula 1 for the French Grand Prix preview. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and take care. And I'll see you next time for another YouTube video. Goodbye.